Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, Mike Kopp of MMA Creative, National Post political reporter Ken Whitehouse, and syndicated conservative talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome, guys. The governor late this week made it clear that that stimulus money that took the layoffs off the table is not going to be enough because of continuing decline in sales tax revenues. Layoffs and furloughs are back on the table. Bad news for state workers, isn't it?
Well, when you've got 9 months in a row of, I think they call that negative fiscal growth, which is another way of saying we're not making any money. It's really hit a lot of people harder than I think the governor and members of both parties of the State House and State Senate would really like to see. So something's going to have to give at some point.
Does he have much choice?
I don't see where he has any choice. And the fact of the matter is, even though we heard this week that the unemployment numbers nationally seem to be stabilizing, the fact is there's still a lot of people out of work. And until that turns around, we don't have any choice.
Any other places to cut?
Well, and Friday we saw that the unemployment rate has hit a high of 25 years,
Yep.
so the numbers are still very bad. The good news, I think, from the state standpoint is that about 4,000 or 5,000 of these layoffs are unfilled positions. So it's not like people that are there are going to go home. They're unfilled positions that are going to remain unfilled, and frankly, the private sector's been doing that for a long time now.
And even with the stimulus money, the lingering effect of this recession could continue for several more months, and we could be looking at the same problem again once that money runs out. That these cuts and layoffs could be even deeper.
I think this thing goes well into the next election cycle in 2010. It's going to be the #1 issue going into the next election cycle.
And it's going to take a long time to get caught up with the money that we lost over the last 9 months.
President Obama this week didn't make any friends with big business, saying that he wants to close some overseas tax loopholes and make them pay for profits they make overseas. The bottom line is going to be, though, if he increases the fees on the companies, they're going to in turn send it off to the taxpayer who buys their product, so it's really going to be an increase of a tax on the taxpayer.
Yeah, really, there was a lot of inconsistency this week. First of all, the president made the announcement to go after tax cheats while standing next to tax cheat Tim Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, who didn't pay his taxes.
I didn't know that.
While invoking the name of Charlie Rangel, who hasn't paid his taxes. And then he's talking about trying to shut off this money flowing overseas while wanting to put more money into the taxpayer-funded bailout of the auto industry. General Motors announcing they're going to spend billions of dollars to create jobs overseas that taxpayers are paying them. They just need to get consistent.
They're talking about a lot of money, $200+ billion.
Right.
Well, then one of the things interesting too that two of the people that are most affected by the tax changes were actually Obama's biggest contributors, who are vehemently opposed to him on this thing. So while he does have some matters that are inconsistent on that one point, it is interesting and should be pointed out that he has some people that have been major supporters that are also going to be affected by this.
Well, and there's no inconsistency here. The fact of the matter is this is something he talked about in the campaign that had to be done. There's no surprise. It should be no surprise to people in corporate boardrooms that this is a position the president was going to have to take.
Is there any way, though, that really the companies will end up paying this and not taxpayers, not consumers?
Well, anytime you do anything to a company, it's going to have a trickle down effect on the economy and people that buy or sell their products. No question about it. But the fact of the matter is, you still have to do something about those loopholes that need to be closed.
You were talking earlier about unemployment showing a little bit of a decrease nationally. Some signs this week that the economy may be crawling out of the recession a little bit, still home sales down. But does it look like, anyway, maybe we've turned a corner or at least bottomed out at this point?
It's just going to be a little bit more time till we can tell. Just kind of like what we were talking earlier about the swine flu. It'll dip and and it's the same thing's going to happen with this. It's probably we won't be able to really tell if we're out of it until about 6 months after we're out of it.
Well, and Warren Buffett said it earlier on your segment. We've had a major heart attack, and it's going to take a long time for us to recover. And I think this thing goes, like I said before, well into 2010.
I think we got to watch the spin of this bounce back that we're seeing. I mean, one of the spins that was being cited this week was that we had 601,000 new unemployment applications instead of 621,000, which we've been seeing. The Associated Press referred to that as a plunge. So if next month we go from 601,000 to 621,000 again, will that be skyrocketing unemployment? We need to make sure we're looking at the real numbers and assessing them accurately. And there really hasn't been a change. We've not bottomed out and bounced back. We've bottomed out and plateaued.
Well, I will add one thing. I think more than ever, I think the one positive thing that I'm seeing, I think a lot of folks would agree with this, with this president, we're seeing more transparency in these kind of reports, from the budget on down to these kind of economic reports.
These are the same reports that are released monthly by the Department of Labor and have been released monthly by the Department of Labor for the last 8 years during the Bush administration.
But we now have
this is not new transparency.
We have a president who's willing to talk about it and talk to the nation about it and help people understand it.
Nationally, locally, the swine flu, we're not doctors, so we can't really talk about the severity, but what about the way the state responded, the way the nation has responded? Do you think they were in tune with this as a crisis? Did they all go overboard? I mean, it looks like safety really was the #1 priority.
Well, the parents that I know who had to keep their kids home from school and then realized later that that was something, I think it depends on your perspective.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of parents who, on the one hand, think it's good to be safe, on the other hand, say maybe we reacted a little too quickly and maybe overreacted.
I think the government officials that spoke, they didn't want to come back. They didn't want to be dealing with a swine flu Katrina, if you will. And it was better to be a little bit overly cautious, but say we don't know for sure. Everybody go back to the house if you've got it, if you're feeling sick. I think, in hindsight, this is something people are going to be talking about and afraid that someone cried wolf. But in actuality, they didn't know what they had to deal with, and I thought they handled it very professionally and carefully so as not to create panic.
And we may pay the real price for it because of that cry wolf syndrome in the fall when we are likely to see it come back in much bigger numbers. The real challenge on this, I think, in the mixed bag is that it wasn't as deadly as it was being portrayed. Actually, the regular flu kills something like 36,000 people a year, mostly the young, mostly the elderly. This hasn't had nearly that impact, but this is also much more widely spread and will likely spread. World Health Organization today was talking about 2 billion people worldwide getting it. Now, will it be as deadly as it was portrayed? Probably not. Will it be more widespread than people have thought? It probably will.
Steve Gill, Ken Whitehouse, and Mike Kopp, appreciate your insight very much. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.